Welcome back, viewer. If you're just joining us, you're watching GBS Morning Extra, and today we are discussing matters that happened at Dagoretti South constituency, and to be more specific, Ngando Ward, beg your pardon, where the Precious Talent Academy classrooms collapsed yesterday, killing about at least 7 students and injuring another 57. And while we were taking the break, we were asking ourselves, as much as this is within the jurisdiction of the education in this at this level is under the jurisdiction of the Member of Parliament's office. That's the CDF, which takes care of building classes and giving out bursaries. But then also the question is, when you talk about devolution and the devolved functions of representation at the devolved level, why do we have MCAs? As much as they do not have a kitty to work on such, but according to my own opinion or judgment, Rokin, I would want to argue that the MCA should be aware of what is going on within his ward, either raise it in the county assembly and discuss it there, or elevate or forward this complaint to the office of the Member of Parliament to cater for such. Why should we wait until our children die? That's when we come out and start pointing fingers of blame and start talking about what measures we're going to put into place.
A member of county assembly has a role, just like the Member of Parliament in the National Assembly. The question of education, especially public education, lies squarely on the office of the Member of Parliament.
Member of Parliament, yeah.
Governors and the Member of County Assembly are mandated to talk about the question of education only in the level that only talks about ECD and even training of ECD teachers. That's why even in my county, Mr. Oparanya is doing a very wonderful job. You go to very many schools, he has come up with structures to address the question of ECD. He has trained ECD teachers and deployed them in various ECD centers around the county. So here in Nairobi, the only place you can put this MCA to task is that this place lacks even an ECD center. As a member of county assembly, you are supposed to represent your electorates. Sure. And in matters of education, I expected to see an ECD center, even one in this region, even one. So on that, to that extent, he failed. But the question of public schools, from class 1 to class 8, because even the incident that happened yesterday, the students that actually were victims to this were from class 6 to class 8. This issue lies squarely on the office of the Member of County Assembly. The Member of County Assembly is given money through the CDF, and CDF was formed in 2003. Yes. Basically, in fact, you remember during that time, there was the question of free public education from Mwai Kibaki.
Sure.
The spirit of Kibaki should reign up to today. We must have public schools in this region, because we cannot be having private schools when we have a Member of Parliament. We cannot be having private, all schools in this region being private schools when we have a Member of a National Assembly who actually is mandated to ensure that these people get public education as a basic right.
It is commonly said, Rokin, that free is not really free.
That one is debatable.
How free is our public education system if we cannot build classes? If kids will learn under trees, then how free? What's the definition of free in this sense?
It means that
if we cannot provide facilities,
it means that some of us don't have faith in our institutions, our public institutions, and that is very wrong. Such a narrative actually supports privatization of things, issues, or even the rich having a say in each and everything in the society, even in education. Let us not make education a rich man's show. We have needy students in this country. And in this region, as you can well see, even the structures around the place, it means that some people in this region cannot afford paying fees in private schools. So the government, much as the question of free primary education is moot, why would we have other regions having that free primary education, even if it is moot, and this region lacks this basic right to those children or pupils in this region? Their parents and even them pay taxes to the government. So let us first of all establish infrastructure, educational infrastructure in this region to actually address the question of public education to these kids. Let those ones who are willing to go to private schools go to private schools, but those ones who can't afford should go to that. I went to a public school up to a certain level before I crossed over to private school. That one should tell you that I actually have enjoyed part of the taxes I pay to this government, and that I have colleagues of mine who have actually gone through that system up to today, and they are doing well. So the question of free primary education is debatable. Some students go there and excel. Others don't excel because there are no facilities, there are less teachers, in fact, there is no equipment, the lockers and desks are not enough.
Classes are crammed up, we have 80 students to one teacher.
That one is actually a challenge in the education sector. That one is a challenge which can only be addressed by government with the other stakeholders of education, like even the teachers' unions, the teachers, even everybody who is involved in the question of education in this country. That one can discuss there. And we can do that to strengthen institutions that actually handle education in the country.
And that's why one would want to ask Rokin, or rather suggest, should there be an institution then that is mandated in setting the standards of public schools? As much as we may say we don't have enough resources to cater for all the children as we are giving the free education, but at least the basic standards that will allow our children to learn in a decent environment. They don't have to be rich, yes, Rokin. We don't have to have, flamboyant classes, but what we are saying is decent classes, so that we can avoid what we saw here. I mean, children dying in such a situation in an institution that is run by the state. It's really appalling.
You know, in the last budget, if you read the budget 2019-2020, education was awarded the highest amount of money in the country.
But
education, in fact, took the junk of the share of the money of that budget. It means that we have the resources, but the resources are being swindled somewhere along the way. And if you since 2003, you cannot tell me that some students are still learning under a tree.
But they are.
That some students, that's why I'm saying.
But the reality is that they are.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You can't tell me that. And we are actually putting money in this.
We have a budget for education.
For education, students are actually allegedly getting bursaries. How do you tell people that you have been allocating money to the Ministry of Education when some students don't even have schools to attend? They are going to private schools to pay a lot of money just to get an education. Education has become so expensive for some who are paying taxes. So this thing can only be addressed if, number one, we handle the question of corruption, number one. Number two, if we strengthen the institutions that are mandated to handle the question of education, starting from the Ministry of Education, down to even the office of the district education officer in the village. Those institutions can actually work hand in hand to ensure that education is a success in this country. But nowadays, it seems like education is not rewarded handsomely. because even if you are a student and your leader didn't go beyond Form 4, you know, I wonder if such a leader can actually empower you academically.
But one would only want to judge, you know, that, but then Rokin, you'll also have to agree with me that some people did not go to Form 4 because they did not want to, but then you find smarter people who are actually leading institutions or maybe even running their own businesses or organizations, but then who did not have classroom education, but does not mean that they have a less concern or less knowledge on how to, you know, propel, you know, how can I say, formal education or classroom education to the upcoming generation.
You know, the question of private, running a private business, that one is open-ended. But if I am an education officer, how can I be an education officer yet I have no clue about education? How do you give me a role to run an education institution when I don't know anything about education?
So what we are seeing,
what spirit will you actually try to inculcate in this institution as a leader?
So what we are looking at here then in our education system, or in the people running the education system, is that what you are alluding to right now is that we might have people who are less educated, who understand less about education, and that's why we are seeing all this.
Some are. But also, let me tell you another problem, and which is ailing the education industry sector in this country. The people in positions of power have actually created all the necessary requirements to make sure that the public education fails, so that because they have private institutions, they have ensured that public education fails, so that children go to their private institutions. And that one is very criminal in this country, a country that is talking about almost 50 years after independence, that some people want to monopolize education. You cannot monopolize education in a country like ours, which is still struggling to be second, to develop economically.
It's still a, it's still a developing country.
You know, somebody said that, I think it was Henry Ford, that the most criminal-minded person is not he who actually takes the life of another person, but he or she who is given the position of leadership, yet he has no vision for the people. If you are a leader and you have no vision in matters of education for your people, I think you are not supposed to represent those people. You are not supposed to lead them. And I just want to ask the leadership of this region to up their game, to pull up their socks, and look for solutions so that they actually help this public that is paying taxes just like me and you, and who actually equally need public education in this region. Let us not monopolize education in the hands of private individuals who are only there to accumulate resources and profits at the expense of the poor, of the hoi polloi of this region.
So, Rokin, if I hear you correctly, then you are bringing up the narrative of cartels again.
Of course.
And, you know, Kenya and cartels, there are cartels in every sector in Kenya?
Of course. You know, let me tell you something. If you investigate in this region, I'm very sure in this particular region, Ngando, very senior people have private schools. People who have been serving in government have private schools in this region, but they are willing, and they will do anything to make sure that this region does not have public schools. For example, this school had very poor infrastructure.
Sure.
But how comes it has 800 students?
800 students.
It
That's
means,
a huge population.
In a private entity, in Nairobi, that one is a huge population of students. It means these students actually have a thirst for education, but they don't have anywhere to go. So some individuals in this region have made sure that maybe the question of public schools does not come up, so that people go to their schools. And that's the issue in this region. And it happens all over. Some people frustrate government efforts to come up with the infrastructure and facilities so that they benefit.
And those must be well-connected people, because, I mean, the government knows, and not anybody can just stand on the way of government if government wants to.
I was so ashamed to see a member of parliament who was given awarded 142 million shillings in the CDF kit, because every CDF is given 142 million shillings. How do you get 142 million shillings, yet you don't have even schools? And education lies squarely under your office.
Under the office of the...
Surely. What have you been doing? Even before you, the leaders before you. It means there are people who are constantly either advising these guys not to come up with schools or frustrating the efforts of public schools in this region so that students go to their schools. And that's the truth.
But then these are matters that needs to be raised, you know, in society. These are not things that one can, you know, be quiet about. Why be quiet about it then?
My friend, cartels in this country. You know, when you speak about cartels.
But then when we give too much credit to the cartels, I'm sorry to say this, but we want to sound like, you know, our good politicians who always blame it on cartels.
I'm not rewarding.
Take, for instance, the former governor of Nairobi. He always made a lot of noise about the cartels. Talk about the current governor, who is also still making a lot of noise about cartels. Are we going to give credit to cartels and say the cartels have made us not be able to do our job?
We must not reward cartels by praising them.
That's what we're giving them. We're giving them more credit than is due.
A country that follows the rule of law, a country that has a leadership, a firm leadership like ours, must actually address the question of cartels, because they pose a great danger and insecurity to the people. Because some of them want to take credit and for things they have not done. Others want to loot. Others want to even maim for their own selfish interests. And that is very wrong. If we have a law that everybody, you know, because the law is not meant for the poor alone. The law is meant for everybody. Unless if the Kenyan law is divided between the haves and the have-nots, the haves are not party.
Which is not the case.
Which is not the case. So in this region, if we talk, the question of cartels is a reality. They are there. Some people want to frustrate government initiatives. And it is not a secret that not just in education, in the land sector, in all ministries, people have come up. Actually, you have heard various issues on television, over the radio, people claiming that some individuals are frustrating them, even in their quest to get justice over even land or historical injustices. And that's why those people were categorized as cartels, I think, by Gidongo in his report. And that's
the former ethics cabinet secretary.
And even he actually defined the question of corruption, whereby he categorized them into two: minor corruption and even major corruption. The grand corruption, like the NYS scandal, the looting,
the
Anglo-leasing. So, as a country, we have a very clear-cut law. We have the Constitution, which is very clear to everybody. But now, these guys have actually come up to frustrate the efforts. And it happens all over.
Rokin, when you look around, I don't know if time will allow us to discuss this, but it's also one of the issues maybe we can discuss in the last remaining about 7 minutes that is remaining. Maybe you can just touch on it. The issue that is now happening in the coastal region. We have, in the coast now, a lot of demonstrations. We saw what happened yesterday. And a study carried out by the University of Nairobi revealed that more than 60% of employees working at the container freight stations in Mombasa were sacked over the period that the SGR has been running. And since the government actually decided that they're going to give 100% of the work to the railage. What do you make of this? These are laws. These are billions of shillings that were invested SGR is the most expensive infrastructure project that the Kenyan government has ever undertaken.
I've never taken SGR to be a government, our national government project. I always take it as a Chinese project.
Why so?
Because it is in China that the policy of one road, one belt initiative came up. And that's when we saw the SGR coming up. It is not our project. It is a project to connect us to China. That's the truth. It is not helping us economically.
It is not connecting the coastal region to the inland?
It is actually connecting the goods from China to Nairobi and to Naivasha and to the inland parts of Africa. That's the truth.
That's how you want to look at it, Rokin?
For me, let me tell you one thing.
Yes.
If it were a Kenyan project, you know, I like people who talk reality. Let us not discuss the question of modernity without development. You know, in Kenya or in Africa, we discuss modernity without development. We have phones, yet we cannot even assemble the phones. We think we are developed by having WhatsApp. We are not. That one is modernity without development. Having, like SGR, development is empowering the people. Empowering the local people. If you can sack 60% of the people in the freight stations, if you can actually make the drivers of these trucks jobless, if you can make the people who actually benefit from these containers jobless, and you know there is only one driver in the SGR, so you are sacking 60% of the people to reward one driver. What are we, yet it is very clear that the SGR is not actually even paying itself. It has been very
actually
clear.
it made a loss. I think still, according to one of the studies, is that it made a 10 billion loss this year, in the first year of operation.
SGR was a bad idea, and it is going to haunt us in the foreseeable future, because if we don't actually look at this issue in an in-depth manner, we are going to incur losses. In fact, we have not incurred losses. And remember, this is a machine that is depreciating.
And what can be done now, Rokin? Because before even the project, when the project was being pushed, there was, you know, the economist, David Ndii, of course, who came out strongly and even dared speak publicly and say that this thing or this project had no feasibility study. But the government still went on.
If an economist like David Ndii speaks against such a project, you must actually put your ears on the table and listen. Personally, I feel like, you know, I remember when this issue of SGR came up, we saw leaders running to buy land. In fact, in the beginning, we have a railway line that comes to Nairobi, the railway station. Why wouldn't they use that place, which is public land, to construct this thing? They incurred huge expenses for the people, for the taxpayers' money, because leaders ran to buy land. Others went to grab so that they can get a share of this money to just incur expenses. That one is number one, the question of corruption. Secondly, such a project must actually be looked at in a very collective manner and in a manner that is sustainable for the future. You cannot tell me that this thing is coming to develop the country, then you sack the very people
who are now supposed to benefit from the same.
From the same. So how are you helping these people? Have you given them an alternative way that they are going to earn a living? As a country, let us not just sack people. Retrenchment is actually normal, but let us give people an alternative way to actually earn a living instead of just laying them off, then leaving them to just wander around. You know, that's why I'm saying that the question of SGR is not sustainable. The question of SGR is not a Kenyan project. It is a Chinese project, and it is not just happening in Kenya. It is happening all over, in Zambia, in every.
It
is
in
a
Zambia,
one belt, one road initiative that.
In Indonesia.
Yeah, let us not own up a project that is not ours.
But what can we do about this? Because, I mean, right now, China is the biggest lender to the African economy. I mean, there's no one pumping in development money more than China in Africa this time, and it's a fact.
I believe in Dambisa Moyo's book, Dead Aid. Dambisa Moyo wrote a book, and actually she inspired me about aid in Africa. And I'm not a proponent of aid. I don't support an inward approach to development in Africa. The only thing that can help Africa grow is intra-African trade. If we improve our intra-African trade and leave alone the question of foreign aid, leave alone the question of even military aid from abroad, concentrate on developing our industry, concentrate on actually doing trade with Uganda, with Egypt, with Nigeria. If we improve our intra-African trade and have an inward-outward approach to development, we will develop. For example, in the Congo, in the 1960s, during Patrice Emery Lumumba's time, the USA, under the CIA, gave in their aid in the guise of actually helping the Congo crisis. The Belgium government did so. But what were they after? Were they after developing the Congo? Has Congo developed?
Not really.
Not really. They were after the oil. And you see, such question has actually led people to their graves, talking about the truth. They have led people to their grave. Even Patrice Lumumba
was
himself
slaughtered and was killed.
Foreign aid is not about helping Africans, because in the first place, even this money sometimes does not trickle down to the people. It remains in the pockets of the leaders.
As we finish, and I think Africa is going there, because the establishment of the free trade area actually brought about 50 countries together, although it took a long time, but now it's opening up, and I believe that would help develop the intra-Africa trade that you're speaking about. Maybe in your final remarks, Rokin, because our time is up, as you conclude, maybe you can just give us a point on that as you conclude.
I think it is time our African leaders, and even Kenyan leaders, because we are part of Africa, listen to experts. Listen to experts. It is actually ideal to actually listen to the people who understand the question of economics, the question of development. We should not discuss modernity without development. Discussing SGR without sustainability to the locals is actually very bad. It's a bad idea for us. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rokin Okoth, for finding time to come into the studio, of course, as always. Viewer, we have come to the end of our program today. Thank you very much for staying tuned. For comments, suggestions, or opinion, you can send that to our email address, info@gbskenya.com. Our SMS line is 21144. Remember to keep the conversation going on our hashtag, that's GBS Morning Extra. My name is Timothy Omondi. Do have yourself a lovely day. Kevin Nyariki is up next with the Sports Extra. For me, it's bye-bye for now.